So I have to apologize about homework 9. You'll see I had a brain fart on it. I gave you like 2 definitions of what wilderness pay could be, and I only had an answer key for one of them. And so there was a student here smarter than me who pointed that out. So I went in and for like number 1 on 2 on homework 9, everybody got full credit for regardless of what they put. And I redid it. I'm going to go over again today, and I've got a new homework 10 is a redo of homework 8. We're actually going to do half of it in class today, just to make sure everybody's clear about how to do that kind of problem, because it will be on the test. There's, let's see, homework 10. So homework 9 is due Wednesday at midnight. That's the one where you've got to do pivot tables for pecans, right? Anybody started, had any trouble yet? So that means no one started it. That's okay. We got baseball to watch. Right. And then homework 10 is due October 12th at midnight. That's one we're going to have to do today. Homework 11 is kind of weird. I know homework 11 is due before homework 12. That's just how things happen in the world of Dr. Norwood. But it's something to help you with the project. I just need you to do a little faster than usual because I'm going to use the results of one of the answers in class, and it's something to really help you with your project. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to go over homework 8, how I confused you on homework 8, how homework 10 is a redo of homework 8. Then we're going to start talking about using internet surveys to measure food preferences, and like we usually do, give you applications of how you can do it in your project. Talk about homework 11 and how you can use Google Forms. So if you're going to do an internet survey as part of your project, I would like to see a copy of the survey. You can do the survey in anything you want. Google Forms is the easiest one to use. And so I'm going to just show you a little about that. And do keep in mind, I expect good projects. Like, although I gave really high scores on question 4 of exam 1, the kind of work you did in there is not near good enough for the project. So I'm expecting a lot more in the project. All right, let's get started. One example we use a lot in this class is the example of guaranteed tender steaks versus regular ribeye steaks. And we talk about willingness to pay, meaning what's the maximum amount people will pay for guaranteed tender steak. And we can think about this willingness to pay in 2 ways. And unfortunately, on homework 8, I said both ways. Like in the chart, I gave the definition as both. I was hurrying through it, but it's not my fault. What's to blame, Tom? Why did I mess up? What do we blame on everything? COVID. It was because of COVID. All the stress of COVID was making me really rush through it, so that was the real reason. So remember, here's the scenario. We have a regular ribeye, and then you can have a guaranteed tender ribeye. And we're trying to think about how much more people will pay for the guaranteed tender steak to figure out what kind of price we should charge. Well, one definition when we talk about willingness to pay is just the total amount for the steak. So maybe we say willingness to pay for the steak for this person is $15, meaning they're willing to pay up to $15, but no more in total on a per pound basis for a guaranteed tender steak. And then there's the willingness to pay as a premium, meaning how much more. So maybe in another measure, we say the willingness to pay is 5, meaning they're willing to pay $5 more and no more for a guaranteed tender steak than a regular steak, which means that if a regular ribeye was selling for $8 per pound and the premium willingness to pay was $5, then the maximum they would pay for that guaranteed tender steak is then $13. And when I was telling you how to interpret the histogram, I gave the 2 different definitions for it in the same like paragraph, and then I think I used this one just to calculate the answers. And so I went back in that homework and then gave you full credit for those questions 1 and 2, regardless of what your answer was. Let's see, the other question where we calculate market shares didn't depend on this, so I left that unchanged. Keep in mind, and I was also grading the part where y'all did a summary of the podcast about names of products and how like ice creams have a certain type of vowel, crackers have a different type of vowel. I really want to see, the only way for me to know you really listen to the whole thing, I got to see a full paragraph. It doesn't have to be a lot of words, just one good full paragraph. And I'm looking for key things. If you just put down 2 sentences, you're not going to get full credit. So, I'm thinking, at least 400 words, 4 to 5 complete sentences. Just hit the main stuff. And so like another homework coming up, you're going to be looking at, you can listen to the podcast of how sushi became acceptable, and then the newest homework I'm assigning, doing a podcast of how we think about product design went from what's the one best recipe to what are the best recipes for different people. I mean, instead of trying to figure out like the one best spaghetti sauce, how we now say, okay, what are the 5 best spaghetti sauces out there, because people do have a variety in taste. All right. Okay, so what we're doing here is on the new homework, it's a lot like it's basically, the homework 10 is basically questions 1 and 2 from homework 8. It's just I redo the definition there of what willingness to pay is, and I use a different price, and I ask you to calculate how many people would buy each type of steak and the market share. And so we're just going to do that here. So this is the same histogram, and what I'm telling you here now is these willingness to pays refer to premiums. So they're not the willingness to pay in total for a guaranteed tender steak. It's the maximum premium they'll pay for a guaranteed tender steak relative to a regular steak. So this 22% here, where willingness to pay is between 8 and 12, what we're saying there is 22% of people are willing to pay 8 to 12 more dollars for a guaranteed tender steak than a regular steak. And so that means if the regular ribeye is $8, then the maximum people will pay for the guaranteed tender ribeye is 8 plus 8, or 8 plus 12. So the total willing to pay is like $16 to $20. And so we apply that to the question. And so this is the question. You saw this on the other homework. It says, based on these data, let's simulate a grocery store activity. Suppose a regular ribeye sells for $8, a guaranteed tender ribeye sells for, now just change the price to $19.99, and 1,000 people pass by the steaks. How many people would purchase the regular ribeye, the guaranteed ribeye, and how many wouldn't purchase any? All right. And so if the regular ribeye sells for $8 and the guaranteed ribeye sells for $19.99, then the premium charge for the guaranteed ribeye is $11.99. Right. And so the extra cost is $11.99 for the guaranteed tender steak. And so the question now is what percent of people will pay more than that? Well, we look here, and we see there's 22% of people will pay between 8 and 12. Now, would those people buy the guaranteed tender ribeye? So the extra cost is $11.99. Their willingness to pay is between 8 and 12. Or say 8 and $11.99. And the answer is no, because those people, they're not willing to pay $12 or more for the guaranteed tender steak, but it costs about $11.99. But now we have these people, they're willing to pay, all those people there, they're willing to pay $12 more, $13 more, $14 more, $15 more, $16 more. So they're willing to pay up to $12 to $16 more, but they can get it for just $11.99. So it's almost like saying, okay, I value something at, let's say $12, I can get it for $11.99. Do I buy it? Yeah. I value something at $13. If I get it for $11.99, do I buy it? Yeah. And so those people right here, all of these people, they're going to buy that guaranteed tender steak. Does that make sense? And what about these people? They're willing to pay between $16 and $20 more. Will they buy it? Yeah. They're even more eager to buy it. And so what we find that the percent of people willing to buy the guaranteed tender steak is 20% plus 4%, so 24%. And that's the answer to number 1 on homework 11. And, do know that this problem is going to be on exam 2, and this is the exact same interpretation I'm going to use for it. I'm sorry, whatever confusion was there. So we know if you charge $11.99 more for it, these data tell us that 24% of people who buy a steak at least will buy the guaranteed tender steak. Because remember, 10% of people here wouldn't buy either steak. But then what the question does, it says, remember it says, of the 1,000 people, how many will buy the regular ribeye, the guaranteed ribeye, and neither? And that 24% and that 10% there is all we need. So we say, okay, how many will buy the guaranteed tender ribeye? 24% times 1,000 people, 240 people will buy the guaranteed tender ribeye. What percent of people will buy the regular ribeye? Well, that's all these people. People whose willingness to pay is like less than 12. So 22% of people here, 21% of people here, and 23% of people there. And so you do all those up, and that's 66% times 1,000. 660 people will buy the regular ribeye. And then you have 10% of people who say they won't buy either ribeye. So 10% times 1,000 is 100 people will buy neither steak. And this is a simulation based on these like auction data that we collected, and we're saying of the 1,000 people, who will buy this, who will buy that, who will buy neither. If we've done it right, the number of people choosing something should sum to 1,000. And yeah, so 240 plus 660 plus 100, 1,000 people. So we've allocated it correctly. And so if that's what we charge, these kind of data give us a pretty good idea of how much guaranteed tender steak we need to buy and have on hand to meet consumer demand. Can be especially useful if you've never sold this before and you have no idea how much to keep on hand. And then the other question is just about market share. Number 2, of all the ribeyes sold, what's the market share of regular guaranteed ribeyes, respectively? Well, for guaranteed tender steaks, you're going to sell 240, and the total steak sold is 240 plus 660. So 27% of all steaks sold is going to be guaranteed tender. For regular, out of 1,000 people, you're going to sell 660. Total amount sold was 240 plus 660 again, for 73% market share for regular. So the market share of guaranteed tender ribeyes is 27%, and the market share of regular ribeyes is 73%. Okay. Now we're going to start talking about internet surveys. And You know, I'm saying internet surveys now. It doesn't have to be. You can still do mail surveys. There's still telephone surveys. But I'm going to say internet surveys because they're used a lot now, and to just really differentiate this thing I'm calling surveys from questionnaires that you may give in like a taste test experiment or even a focus group. And so, you know, when you have a focus group, you may have people fill out some questions there. Usually you do. If you do a taste test, you may have people fill out some questions there. What I'm mainly talking about is a survey where it's almost all hypothetical questions, and they're answering it by themselves, and it's mostly hypothetical questions. That's what we're doing. Remember I think it's homework 9, you're talking about pecan data. And remember the introduction to it, we have this kind of two different kind of pecans. We can grow pecans from seed and just let them grow up. We call those natives. And there's no telling what those trees are going to be like. It's just like each of you is different from each other because you have unique genetics. Or or sometimes if there's one particular pecan tree we really like, we want more of it, we can just clone it. Just like if there's one of you who's a particularly special student, we could clone you over and over again and get all kind of awards and then get caught for biomedical ethics. And now suppose we want to look at pecans from clones versus natives. And we want to say, which one do people like better? And what you're looking at in your homework, remember, is blind taste test, where people don't know what's what. They're just eating a pecan and they're indicating using hedonic scores how much they like the appearance and how much they like the flavor. And so remember, if you're going to have a taste test on your project, you can use that questionnaire there and the whole survey outline as a format for something you can do. But you can also ask these questions in like an internet survey form where people aren't going to be tasting anything. They're just answering some questions. And so that's what we're going to be looking at here. And what we're going to be doing is, I'm kind of mimicking some other work that was done. So the spoiler alert is, in internet surveys, meaning in hypothetical scenarios, people say they like natives better, but in blind taste tests, they don't. And so you get those two conflicting things. So if we're asking this question, do people prefer native or improved varieties? We could ask them in surveys. We can have them taste it. And, you know, both of them are important. And, you know, it may seem like the taste should be really what matters. Like, why would you even do a survey? Why not just have people taste it to see? It's because if you're selling pecans with names on them, just the names really do matter. You know, by now, I hope you're convinced in this class that there are many things other than the physiological sensation of taste and flavor that determines your preferences. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over some different types of some different formats of questions you can ask, and to get you thinking about what you can do in your project. This is one that we've kind of gone over before. You remember when I think it was question 4 on the exam, where there was like a guaranteed tender steak versus regular steak at different prices, and people indicated how likely they were to buy it, and you used that. You simultaneously solved 2 equations to figure out how much more a person would pay for willingness to pay. This is kind of like that. And what we're going to be looking at, we're going to say, suppose we want to know, in particular, we're interested in 4 different attributes of pecans. How pecan size matters for preferences, whether it's improved or natives, and improved means those clones I'm talking about. We also want to know the extent to which whether produced in Oklahoma matters to people, and we want to look at price. And so one way of doing this is to create a hypothetical shopping scenario where we make different bundles of goods. Like here we have large pecans Well, let's look at how the question's phrased. We say, suppose you were shopping in your favorite grocery store and came across each of the following 1-pound packages of raw pecans. For each package type, please indicate the degree to which you agree or disagree with the following statement: I would purchase this package of pecans. So they come as large pecans, native variety, produced in Oklahoma, $10 per package, and they indicate the extent to which they would buy it. In homework 11, where you fill out a survey, you're going to answer a question like this. And then we're going to take that data and show you how to analyze it. So there's that one package. But then remember, what we want to know is how each attribute impacts overall preferences. And if you just had that one package and people like it a lot, well, you don't know why they like it. You don't know if it's because it was a large pecan, or if it was because it was improved variety or native, or if it was because produced in Oklahoma. So you have to have some variety there to see the impact of each attribute. So on the next one, I keep it exactly the same, except instead of native, I call it an improved variety. So these two right here are the same, except one is a native pecan and one's an improved pecan. And then if people indicate a higher score, that lets me measure the extent to which they prefer improved varieties or not. But that only lets me see the impact of variety. It doesn't tell me anything about how price impacts or where it's produced. So come down here, now it's exactly like the first one, except instead of large pecans, I have small pecans. And I ask them how much they like it. Down here, it's exactly like the second one, except I have improved variety. And so what I try to do is I make enough different types of packages such that I can determine the influence of each individual attribute. You know, just imagine it like this. Suppose you have a football team and you've got your B team, and the B team seems to be pretty good. They seem to work well together. But what is it about the B team? And so when they play your A team, they seem to do really well. But determine what really is good about the B team. Maybe you take each individual member out one at a time and put them on the A team and see how they do. Bring the B team wide receiver on the A team, see if they do really well. Bring their quarterback to the A team, see how they do really well. So what you do on each different question is you change one attribute at a time. And then, of course, because their scores might be impacted by the order, we would randomize the order of the pecan packages there. So sometimes this is the first one, sometimes this will be the second one listed, sometimes this will be the first one listed, sometimes this will be the third one listed, and so on. In the way we'll analyze this, you might remember regression from statistics or 3213, like an OLS regression, ordinary least square, something like that. That's how we'll analyze it. That's what it's used for. This is a nice kind of question for a lot of reasons. One is that, well, you know how much people like each one. And if they like one thing more than another, it kind of tells you how much more they like it. For instance, if they really give a much higher score when the word native comes up, that tells you that native is really important to them. And the score may go up when the price is lower, of course. But if native tends to make it go up really a lot, then that's telling you how much each attribute measures. Now, one kind of problem you can have with this is it can be easy for people to kind of be lazy and just kind of give the same score to everything. You know, they look at this and they say, well, I just kind of like it all the same. And maybe in reality, they somewhat agree to everything, but they don't agree to everything. They really do like, some attributes really do matter more to them, but not so much for them to give a higher score to one or another. And so in this question, we're not forcing them to choose one bundle over another. They can give the same score to each one. But then sometimes that's good. I mean, there may be cases where they like each different bundle the same. And so you have to make a judge. We'll see a question in a minute where you force people to choose which one they like better. But when it comes to writing surveys, you have to decide whether I want to force this person to choose one over another, or whether I let them say they like them both equally. And sometimes you just kind of got to go with your gut feeling. There's no real scientific way to say which one is better. Let's look at another way. This is a different way of doing a rating question. This is kind of the same, except instead of discrete categories where you go from like a degree to some degree, now you have this rating scale where you go from 0 to 100. So you can, instead of going from like one discrete category for another, you can go just a tiny bit higher if you want. And here what we're doing is, I don't know about you, but sometimes these questions, they can be kind of cognitive tasking. Like, so I got this one pecan. Okay, it's large, it's native, produced in Oklahoma, the price is this. And by the time I've gotten down to the last one, I can't even remember what the first one was. And that's kind of annoying when surveys are, the last thing we want to do when taking a survey for a little money or for free is have to think real hard. We want to save that for the night before a test. But if you're just doing something for fun, you don't want to have to think too hard. And so you can make these questions simpler like this. So if what we really want to know is what attributes matter the most, let's just ask them directly. And so we give them these attributes: produced in Oklahoma instead of another state or country, native variety instead of improved variety, large instead of small pecans, low price instead of high price. And then we ask them just to increase this button until it gets to the actual importance of them for each attribute. And if they come here and if they give a really high score for native and a lower score for the other ones, well, that's telling you that it being a native variety is really important to them. Is there anything you don't like about that question? Consider this one here. Suppose you're taking this survey and you look at it. What does that suggest when it says native variety instead of improved variety? It should say improved. Does it kind of suggest one is better? Yeah. It's suggesting that you should like natives better. And so that's kind of a biased question. And it's okay to do a question like that if, for some people, they answered this question, but for other people, they get a different question that says improved variety instead of native variety. And then when you combine the results, and so the other one biases it the other way, so with the sample as a whole, the two biases cancel out. Another thing you could do is, instead of this attribute here, I would probably say just have native variety, and then another scale, improved variety. There's no other possibility, but that's okay. It's okay for a question to be slightly leading or a little biased if other people in the sample are asked a different question with the offsetting bias. It's kind of like if you were analyzing the effectiveness of a teaching method, and suppose you do this one sample where you have one teacher teach a certain way, another teacher teach another way, where one teacher may have a different appearance that makes people pay more attention, like that. Like students like taller teachers. They like male teachers for some reason. I don't know. That's crazy. And really what their impression of the teacher in their first like 15 seconds of seeing them has a big impact on their evaluations. And so if you're evaluating a teaching method, you know this one professor, maybe it's like Dr. Riley, who's like extremely, extremely handsome, right? He's the most handsome ag economist in the whole world. Well, any way he teaches is going to be great. You know, everybody's going to study to make Dr. Riley happy. And so if you really want to say, was it Dr. Riley or a teaching method, you got to get me doing the offsetting bias to teach the other way. And that's all you're doing here. And like the other thing, we would randomize this order here such that sometimes low price instead of high price would be up at the top. And even Google Forms can randomize for you. This doesn't show up that good. If you saw it in Qualtrics is the survey software that we usually use, it would show up better. But this is where we want to force people to choose one attribute over another. So we're saying no more ties. We're not going to let you rate all attributes the same. So here, they could have given each attribute the same score, 50, all the way. What if we want them to force you to choose? Well, this is here, we say, suppose you were shopping in your favorite grocery store and wished to purchase a 1-pound package of raw pecans. Rank the following pecan attributes in terms of its importance to you as a consumer. And I forgot to update it. It should say where 1 equals most important and 4 equals least important. And then it's obvious if you saw it in the survey, but what the person can do is they can drag this and bring it up here, and there would be a 1 that showed up there. I might pull it up in a minute. But they can easily put these so that, you know, if pecans large in size was most important, they'd drag it up here. If low price was most important, they'd put it second. Most good software has a lot of different ways you can do this ranking. And so you get a 1 for best, 2 for second best, 3 for third best, 4 for fourth best. And in the textbook on page 45, there's a list of a lot of different types of survey questions you can ask. And it's also, in next class we'll go over writing tips, but it also has some different writing tips. So if you're doing a survey for your project, you definitely want to go through those and steal some of those ideas on how to ask questions, but especially the writing tips. And you can analyze the results from this using regression as well, or just averages, like what's the average ranking for pecan versus where the pecan was produced. And you know, sometimes you might be interested in, maybe you are mostly interested in how raised in Oklahoma impacts pecan preferences for Oklahomans. And maybe you want to ask the question a lot of different ways. You know, there's nothing wrong with asking, like, this question can tell you how important geographical location is. So is this one, so is that one. You can ask it multiple ways, and that's one way, and analyze the results of each. And that's one way of determining to what extent the question itself influences people's preferences. Because people will exhibit different preferences based on different questions. It's the way we are. And my favorite little thing about surveys, don't write this down, I won't ask you about this, but there's something called I can't remember the name of it, but just answering a survey question about your preferences changes your preferences. And so it's kind of, you cannot ask people about their preferences without changing their preferences. It means you can't really measure people's preferences as they are. They did a thing where they went out and asked people their preferences about, you know, different cars and things like that. Then they followed up on it, and they found that just answering a question about cars makes you more likely to buy a car. And so, you know, this isn't physics, unless you consider the uncertainty quantum physics thing, but we don't need to go on that. And finally, we haven't done much with there's nothing wrong with simple multiple choice questions. And you can have a whole survey that's just simple multiple choice questions as long as they're written well. So this one here, suppose we want to just concentrate on native versus improved pecans. So we say, when it comes to purchasing pecans, do you prefer to buy native or improved pecans? And we go through here, we give them an option for I prefer native pecans. I prefer improved pecans. And here we can get a little more nuance. Here we can have someone tell us that they don't even know what the hell you're asking about, which would probably be most people, or people who like them both equally, and to get information on whether they rarely or never buy pecans. And a last one that I'll go over, this is something that Dr. Van Overbeek may do more of, I'm not sure. It's called a semantic differential scale. Sometimes you want to know kind of the qualities or the psychological effects certain aspects of a product have. Like maybe you want to know, okay, we're talking about pecans here. Are we mainly targeting males or females or something like that? Or do people consider pecans healthy or unhealthy? And so you're thinking of these attributes that can go along with a good. And if you've got an attribute and you can have two opposite meanings of that one attribute, you can use a semantic differential scale. So this would actually, I don't usually think about pecans being something that's gender related, but maybe it is. White Claw would be a better example. Remember, males never supposed to drink White Claw. But we say, do you consider pecans to be a more masculine or feminine food? And if they think it's more masculine, they can move it over here. If they think it's more feminine, they can move it over there. And so that can just give you an idea of what kind of like the spirit of the food is to people. And notice on this question, I start them off in the middle, and that makes sense. Where you start them off will affect their answers. If you started it off down here, they'd give you a different answer. Okay. All right, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pull up some stuff about homework 11. Raise your hand if you've used Google Forms before. Okay, good. Was it ever covered in class, or you just used it for other things? Like doing a survey in a club or something? Yeah, really useful, right? So this is homework 11. It's where I want you to answer some questions about the project. Now, do know that at the end here, I do have some pecan questions. Let me show you those first just to make sure. Okay, so y'all seem very familiar with Google Forms. If you haven't had experience and you go to use it, have some trouble, just let me know. And if you need me to put up like a brief tutorial or something, let me know. But remember, if you want to see a preview, you go to this little eye icon there, and this will show you what the survey looks like. So with the pecan question, I've got one question where I give different bundles of pecans, like small pecans, improved variety produced in Oklahoma, and then would you purchase this package of pecans? I've got a shorter scale, so just strongly disagree, disagree, neither, agree, strongly agree, and just give me an answer. And then I got a question, how often do you purchase pecans? Never, rarely, sometimes, frequently, very frequently. And then what is your gender? I've got the other for you there. Okay. Okay. I've got a number of questions there to get you thinking more about the project, get you started. The first one is, which type of new food product are you considering? And remember, there were 3 different types: a unique good that has no close substitute, a new variety of an existing product, or generic, cheaper version of an existing product. If you think it's something other, you can just click other and then, tell me what you want to write. Tell me why it's different. And then, let's see, I think you've done this at least once. Well, you've done it twice. Once on an assignment, once on the exam. Please describe your new food prototype below. What kind of food it is, any recipe that it is, whether it has a marketing name associated with it, a marketing strategy. Most of you have some pretty good details there. I doubt any of you have actually started with objectives or anything, so this is a good time to get started on that. And for helping you with some other stuff, I'm really going to focus in on some of your objectives. So, if you give me some really good objectives there, I can give you some good advice. First question is, how many research objectives will your project have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or more. And then please clearly list each of these objectives below. And what I'm doing there is, I want you to really try on this, be specific. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to grade the writing so much, but if it looks like you are really thinking hard about making a good project, I'll give you full points. If it looks like you're just writing something just to get something in there, I won't. And so, how many objectives, then please list them. Which of the following research tools do you plan to use? And this is something to really get you started. So we've got focus groups. You can choose interviews, something we probably won't even discuss in class, but you may have read it and liked the idea of it, and you can do that. Internet surveys, taste tests, or you can do other. And if you do other there, you can kind of tell me what that other is. And so if you feel like what you're doing is a hybrid of 2 things, maybe you're doing focus groups and a taste test, meaning you're doing focus groups, but they're going to be tasting a lot of food in there. You can choose other and tell me what it is. And then here, then when I go for each different type, I want you to give me some details. So if you indicated you would use focus groups, in the space below, indicate the type of people you would recruit, how they would be recruited, and outline the kind of questions the moderator should ask. And it's the same thing for internet surveys. If you're using those, what kind of people do you want in and what kind of questions you will ask? And here, I don't want you to just say, I'm going to ask about what they think of this food product. I want some, you don't have to give me the exact specific questions you would ask, but I want something like, if it's a new variety of existing food product, the question can be, I want to ask them to rank different varieties of this food variety, one of them being my new variety. Or it could be, I'm going to give them a number of different varieties at different prices, one of them being mine, and ask them how likely they are to buy it. So what you're trying to tell me there is basically that you're thinking about this and you're paying attention to these lectures and you know what different kind of questions you can ask. Whenever a professor is grading anything that you write, they want to see you say things from class. If you would use taste tests in the space below, indicate people you recruit, how they would be recruited, and an outline of how the tasting experiment would be done. And so there, if you're going to have them taste things, you can use that homework 9 as an example, the pecan one, where I give you a link to the actual questionnaire used. And so there you can say things like, I'm going to have them taste these 5 different goods, one of them being my food product, and indicate which one they like the best. Or I'm going to have them taste just my new food product, and then I'm going to ask them a series of agree-disagree questions, like I think this is too sweet, or I like the flavor, or I would buy a product like this. And then we have the pecan questions. And so I'm wanting, let's see, I'm asking for this to be done by Sunday night, because I'm going to take the answers to these questions and we're going to use them in class. Does that kind of make sense? Let's just do one example. We'll click into, so Matt Drendel's product was a mint chocolate chip ice cream, which contains little to no sugar, but the flavor remains the same compared to the regular mint. So he's going to replace standard sugar with monk fruit extracts. What's monk fruit?
I don't know, I was looking up different sugar types like replacements for it.
Yeah.
It's apparently it's very high sweetness, and so it only takes a little bit to replace the sugar.
Oh, okay.
And apparently it does we put a lot of calories to replace the sugar with. I don't know if it would be a good substitute.
Let's see. What's that?
The most reliable source.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Wikipedia. I have no problem with it at all. Oh, named by Chinese monks. Okay, so that's intriguing. You know, it's a different type of sugar. It's got a cool name to it. Herbaceous perennial vine of gourds. 300 times sweeter than sugar. Huh. Lean green ice cream. I like that. So I guess when I'm thinking about that, these are just some ideas. You know, obviously one thing you can do, you can have a taste test where you say, okay, if it's 300 times sweeter, let's compare a regular ice cream and a new ice cream with 300 times less sugar because it's monk sugar. So you're trying to you say this one's got monk sugar, but yes, it's achieving the same hypothetical level of sweetness. And then you see if people can taste the difference. And then, and so you can do that, and so you can imagine just and one thing Deb's going to talk about is when you have these tests where you give people 2 different things and you just even see if they can tell the difference. So you can have that. And you could also imagine a series of follow-up questions where sweetness is a thing, but there's probably different types of sweetness. And so you can ask some questions to get an idea of how the sweetness is different, or focus groups. Let's say maybe it's focus groups. And so, yeah, you give them 2 different ice creams, regular, one with monk fruit sweetener. And then you tell them one has a different type of sweetener in it. Don't tell them what kind yet. And then you just start asking them to describe what the taste is like. And so if you did, I'm not saying you have to do it that way, but if you did that, so in your research objectives, one objective would be to determine, you can call it, if you want to sound technical, sensory profile, or just say flavor of lean green ice cream when it has equivalent level of sweetness to an otherwise identical ice cream. So you're saying, how does this type of sweetener, how is it different? And then, so that's just the research objective, very general, you just want to know how is it different, even when you try to make the sweetness level the same. And then in your focus group questions, you're telling the moderator that you want to know how people describe the taste. And so you ask them, you want to maybe start with open-ended questions so you don't lead people to, maybe when it's kind of like a coconut flavor. I don't know, I've never had it. And maybe that's what people will say. And so you get open-ended questions like that. But then also ask the moderator if the people think it's a better sweetness, or if it's more bitter or something like that. That's the kind of thing. I don't have any advantage over y'all in coming up with good questions like that. And then, okay, so maybe you've got one focus group like that, but then maybe your second objective, so you got this really intriguing fruit called monk fruit, and you're wondering, should I advertise it as monk fruit or not? Because sometimes the word that goes along with it's good, sometimes it isn't. So has anybody ever had rapeseed oil? And what do we call it? Isn't canola oil rapeseed oil? I think, there's rapeseed, not a very good name. Let's change it to canola. I like that better. Generally, I don't like foods with the name rape in them. And so you're trying to see that there. And so so maybe you do an internet survey to see what people think of the term monk fruit. Okay, well, how would you do that? Anybody got any ideas? Maybe the research objective is use an internet survey to see what the label monk fruit sweetener portends for flavor expectations. Well, it sounded professor-like, didn't it? Portend. And so maybe you could have a question like this. You could give people a scenario where they say, there's a new sweetener called monk fruit sweetener based off the name. It comes from monk fruit, and maybe don't tell them about it being a healthier sweetener because you just want to home in on monk fruit. And you say, do you think monk fruit would be, you could do more masculine, feminine, but maybe, is there a word you can think of that might have an opposite here? Exotic, non-exotic, exotic or boring? you could have a number of different types of sweeteners and ask people which name do they think would provide the best tasting sweetener. So monk fruit sweetener, there's like Ativa sweetener, cane sugar, things like that. And you could have them rank it. You have a scale like this, and so to what extent do you think a sweetener from monk fruit would be? So you can have agree, disagree, maybe I'll go to, agree, disagree to agree, will taste tropical. Here will taste funky. When y'all think monk fruit, is there anything that comes to mind? I know there's something and you just don't want to talk to me. Monk fruit. What do you think of when you think of monks? Peaceful? Yeah, you could say good for brain health. Yeah. Something like that. And they just give it a stint to us they agree or disagree. See, that's pretty easy. What do you want to do now? Lauren? You want to go home? Okay, Lauren wants to go home. Let's pack up. All right, I'll see y'all Wednesday.